we're inching closer to the Netherdeep itself. Chapter 5 is filled with rising action. The stakes are higher, the lore drops are bigger, as we go into the sunken metropolis of Cael Morrow. Okay, so our PCs have aligned themselves and done quests with one of 3 factions in Ank'Harel. I do have a guide for that section if you want to check that out. Now, depending on which faction your PCs have aligned with, they are probably looking for a double agent that's working down here for the consortium in Cael Morrow. Obviously, the Allegiance of Allsight wants to find and eliminate this person, and if you're with the consortium, you want to work with them. The Allegiance knows how to get into the rift. The other 2 factions don't, so the library is going to have you find this key to the Netherdeep, as is the consortium. In this case, the key to the Netherdeep that they're looking for is a ruidium axe that is with a Death's Embrace over in the corner of the map. Now, there are other ways to get into the Netherdeep. Obviously, the pendant is going to work for us, and any ruidium stuff is going to work for us, but not everybody has all that knowledge yet between the factions. Now, the first part of the sunken city here is filled with keystones that have created barriers and airlocks. So you actually aren't really underwater unless something happens to one of those keystones here. And that takes you sort of through this first part of the map. There is one keystone in M5 that is a little dicey. If they don't mess with it though, nothing's gonna happen until they're coming back. And then there'll be some issues for them. And so because of that, you're gonna wanna look at the underwater combat rules and the underwater adventuring rules again right before you get here. There's also a lot of lore for the world that can get dropped at a number of spots here, so let's just go over those quick. First, Cael Morrow isn't the real name of the city. The archaeologists and scholars that have dug this out, they've come up with that. The real name is unknown. It's lost to time from 800 years ago in the Calamity. So this is also the birthplace of orcs in Exandria. Corellon, the Dawnfather, and Grumish were fighting, and the blood from Grumish kind of spilled out onto elves and turned them into orcs, and that's our origin story for that. Now, Grumish didn't like this very much, so he used his spear and, was trying to sink all of Marquette and just obliterate that entire continent. But of course, we know our boy Alyxian came in and parried the blow at the very last second. Damage was still done. This whole city is sunken underneath Ank'Harel. Marquette is full of desert. This was once a jungle city and things were lush and thriving, and that is no longer the case. But Alyxian did save a lot of lives and the continent, even if there were some casualties. So this temple to Corellon in M9 is somewhere where some of this lore could come up. You have this ruidium shard that triggers the second vision, and entering it triggers the first vision. Obviously you have this pulsing and the crescent moon and the shard and all this stuff, these veins of ruidium kind of energy coming out throughout the entire floor. And the 2 visions that come up are gonna drop some of this lore for us. Insight is another person who might have some of the lore here that we'll find out. It's nice to spread out this lore and just sort of pepper it in little pieces so that the players can sort of piece it together themselves and assemble it and talk about it and discuss it rather than having a big lore dump all at once. One thing that I like to do if a player has a clarification or a question on something that they already are supposed to know is to ask them what they know and to have the party sort of fill it all in together. That reminds you what they know. This prevents you from just sort of accidentally letting something slip that you weren't supposed to or that they didn't already know. So I want to talk about pacing a little bit. We are in the rising action here. Things are starting to amp up. We're not quite into the super intense Netherdeep area yet, but we're leading up to this. We're building here. In a movie, you might have lots of fun moments, and then those will start to go away as the drama amps up and amps up. Here, I think we still do want to have fun, silly moments, but we just want there to be less of them or for them to be quicker as we start to amp up. Because depending on how much you play, you could be in Cael Morrow and the Netherdeep for several months of this gameplay. That's a long time to not have any fun or any silly stuff happen. Make sure that still gets in there, but make sure that the stakes are starting to feel higher and higher. It also doesn't mean every single battle should be like a battle to the death. There should maybe be some more close calls, a little bit of attrition on their abilities and their HP as they continue to go. Another thing that's really good to try and do is to end your session on a cliffhanger. Start looking at the clock. Okay, I have 90 minutes left, 60 minutes left. And I try to have 1 or 2 points in mind that I might like to end. You can end the session a little bit early or ask them about the possibility of going a little bit over. Even if you call a session 15 minutes early or 20 minutes early, I think it's worth it. You gave up that 15 or 20 minutes and your players are thinking about what's happening for a week, 2 weeks, a month, especially if you have a really good cliffhanger and we're amping up to the climax. You want them so excited to see what happens next, so excited to play. that's when you're nailing it as a DM. So here are a few suggestions for possible spots that you could have a cliffhanger. Getting a first look at that temple and seeing what it looks like and how it's overrun with this pulsating energy. Or if they quickly get in, once one of them touches the shard that triggers the second vision, you could have the second vision happen and have it collect and suck in that energy and not have the conclusion of that. You could have that explosion of that happen next time, just as a way to really jump them right back into that action. If they're backtracking and it looks like they're gonna go through M5, you could have that keystone collapse and start this fight where water rushes in and the corrupted giant shark is attacking them. That's a great spot to end. Or you could also use the rivals. They're not any specific place. You can plop them down wherever and whenever you need, pretty much. This is also the first time we're seeing the rivals at tier 3, and they've been through hell. Irvin has lost an arm. Ao is just driven blindly by this quest to be a hero, and it's kind of alienating and causing problems with the others. You know, they're still following her, but they're feeling lost, they're feeling hurt. There's a lot of stuff going on, and there's really kind of just a big melancholy over this group now. Okay, so 2 of the factions have them going to get this Ruidium Axe from the Death's Embrace in M13. This is potentially a dangerous fight, and it is foreshadowed a little bit. On their approach, they'd run into evidence of petrified humanoids, and that could happen to your players. The whole shtick of the Death's Embrace is that it likes to grab stuff and pull it in and petrify it. And I think if some rolls go really poorly, this could be a dicey fight. Now, if one of your players gets petrified, don't worry too much yet, see how it's going. But if you're starting to get 2 petrified, or there's a chance of getting a 3rd one petrified, that's when you might think about potentially intervening. Now, one way that this could happen is the rivals could show up here. They could have just been waiting in the wings for your party to weaken the Death's Embrace. They could come and finish it off. They could grab the Ruidium Axe. They could leave most of the party for dead. One hitch that could come up is they need a believer of Corellon to get them into this temple. Now, there is someone like that over in M14. There's no guarantee that that will go your way. And there's also no guarantee that one of your PCs believes in Corellon. I'm not a huge fan of how this is set up because it kind of gives you only one solution to the puzzle if you don't have a PC that believes in Corellon. So you might have to invent something. You might have to have them surface and go fetch an NPC and bring that NPC down and escort them to do this for them. We also, after our visions here, get the Jewel of 3 Prayers into its exalted state. For such a key item in the adventure, I'm really surprised that there's no box text about like how it upgrades or anything like that. So I would try to embellish that a little bit. Maybe it pulls off of the person and is floating and this energy gathers into it and there's a flash of light. Add a little flair to it. It doesn't have to be something super long, but just something to add that extra touch. Probably one of the biggest components of Cael Morrow is this Alyxian Aboleth that's going around. I would think about trying to foreshadow the Aboleth a little bit. Maybe there's just a big dark mass that sort of swims by one of the windows as you're in these airlocked areas early on, that there's something spooky out there. There's also rolling for a random location to decide where the Aboleth is. That's a great thing to do, but don't be afraid to just kind of move it as you need it to make the story interesting at the moment that it could be the most interesting for them to run into it. The Aboleth is also sort of an imposter. It's corrupted by the Ruidium. It's sending these poison thoughts into the minds of some of the PCs. I actually like that the PCs could believe it for a while. This could be the Alyxian that they've been getting visions from and looking for. I do really want to point out to them, this is sort of a distorted version of the voice that they've heard in the visions. Something's not quite the same. I do want to make it clear that it's 2 separate entities. When they do finally defeat it, I think I'm gonna add in a little vision from the real Alyxian, like a hurry, come and get me, or something, so they know, hey, he's not dead, or that wasn't it. I just really want to kind of connect those dots a little bit more than I think the text spells out here. Besides this random location, it does have scouts that will call for it, and it also can sense people near the rift and will get near the rift if too much time passes. I really like this probing telepathy ability, so if anyone speaks to it telepathically, it can sense and learn their secret greatest desires. You actually know stuff about the characters' backstories. You've been there, you can pull out stuff and really have it be a haunting moment for that PC.
You enjoy role-playing games.
So we basically finish out the chapter when we go through the rift and into the Netherdeep for the first time. The Jewel of Three Prayers in its final state or any ruidium weapon can open this up and allow them to get through. But because of the pressure that's on the other side, there's a good chance they're gonna come back right away if they're not all fully prepared. So they might come and go through Cael Morrow again, and there might be, some random battles and stuff going on as they go back and forth. But we also wanna keep things moving here. If you happen to be rolling a lot of random battles, you might think about reducing them just so we can keep up the momentum that the rest of this story is setting up for us. Our players want to get through that, and they want to get through it kind of fast, the way that when you get to the end of a good novel, you just sort of want to binge the rest of it. So we don't want to bog it down with too much random battles, so try to use them appropriately when there's a time that it feels like it really adds stakes and not just soaks up time. So if you've been watching this whole series of guides with me, which is here by the way, you can probably guess that we're going into the Netherdeep next time. Until then, keep rolling and have fun.